Madam Chair, would you kindly unmute the chambers, please? Now we go.
And to get started, we just have one agenda item. See on your agenda in front of you. And I had conversations with both clerk to the board and sheriff. And I believe that what we'll do is for the protocol, is the sheriff will call me if there's an incident or an accident. And then I will contact the clerk to the board and she will send out, as she did, a text message to each of you, or if something requires an email, that would be a text message that will say, check your emails. And if there's follow-up information that's required, then we will just repeat those steps. Unless anybody has any objections. I think it's pretty simple.
That's it, so that everybody gets the information. And the thing is, nowadays, everybody's on scene with their phone. It's on social media so fast,
And we're never going to be.
We're never going to beat it anymore.
Madam Chair, this is Dan Lure. I have a question. So on occasions where Brian Myers sends out notifications for weather emergencies, things of that nature, will that follow a similar protocol? I mean, he's been sending emails with that type of information, but I don't believe we've ever received a text message.
I did not believe that because there's a separate thing. He sends out the weather, like the storm warnings and things like that.
Yes.
Yes, I think that process works fine.
It's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. This would be just in case of an accident or something that involves our law enforcement.
Dan, years ago, I used to share them too until I talked to Brian, and Brian told me that he blind copies everybody. So I know you guys are getting them through Brian.
I think probably the department has to get them too, don't they?
Well, I don't know, I got them, but I don't know if everybody gets them.
I was just wondering, I would think that,
And I think, some of you guys with like fire department notifications, they come over that too, right?
Yes. The thing is that, Brian's emails may not reach everyone. It depends on your availability for internet, but
It comes on the phone too, as a phone number. I get them on my phone.
Yeah, I'm responding.
Yeah,
I am
you get those.
responding. It comes over there too.
Depending on the severity of the storm, I think, because I don't, yeah. That's whatever you guys want to do, we can figure it out.
And in this past case, the sheriff, and he, I believe, is the right person to do the press releases since he knows what's being involved. And he did do the press release and he did send it here about or something in the afternoon. It didn't say anything that much more in it. It said that the family was to be notified. And I think he should reserve that right to do that as well. Other questions? And it's not on the agenda, but I was just reviewing as far as the minutes on the finance committee meeting, and I believe you all received the strategic plan for the second time for the hospital, because it was all sent out earlier, and it was just sent out this past yesterday. So you all should have a copy of that regarding questions on the hospital. And if you want to meet with me after the meeting, I do have the outline as far as how evaluations are done, have been done up to this point, and it entails goals as well. And I can, Mike, if you want to meet with me, I'd be happy to meet with you and share that with you. And anyone else who would want to actually. Any other things to come?
Hi, James, I have.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Okay.
So I went through and I read through all the minutes. and I had to fall out my chair, pick myself back up, and the approval of $10,000 a month for a procurement card for mine without changing procurement policy. So I'm a little, I'm 100% uncomfortable with that. So I'd like some direction in here. What am I doing?
Actually, I'd like to add something to that. I think that what we need to do, remember you guys, I put together a book and I started some policies. I really think what we need to do is look at our policy and see what we need to change in order to make Janice's work easier and the department's work easier. After I looked at some of these policies, I feel like there's some things that we can do better in our policy to help out, so. And there's a subcommittee that was put together in January of supervisors, Cal Roach Davis and Janice and myself. And I would also suggest maybe getting some of the bigger users, the bigger departments involved. So that we can start talking about it and actually formulate a plan to change our procurement policy to better reflect our practices.
So in the meantime, I'm looking for some direction, because now we've kind of given a license to purchase up to $10,000 a month. When our purchasing policy says $500, it requires a purchase order. So I know we talked about this back in January. I didn't know we were gonna go ahead and do that, because now I'm freaking out. Because I don't wanna sign it, it's not, it's 100% against the purchasing policy. So when this happens, what, is there going to be someone who talks to Mike about still following the purchasing policy? Is someone going to give approval prior to any purchases being made? They're gonna be, I don't know, and I can only assume that it's because of what I've seen in the past, it's not gonna happen, and I'm gonna be stuck again.
So the sooner we tackle this, the better off we're gonna be. Because both sides have valid points. And I think that the answer is, it starts with this policy.
Again, the committee was set with Brian,
Jerry and my brother, and then Janice and myself. And when Janice and I spoke this morning, I'm talking about inviting some of the heavier users, highway, buildings and grounds, sheriff's department, maybe a couple small ones.
and this has to be ASAP.
I would say so.
So it's, and we didn't put any stipulations, right, like
It would be a good idea to
emergency.
be the first.
I think someone needs to talk and make sure that this does not circumvent the purchasing policy, because I can guarantee it's how it's gonna
Right,
happen.
she's gonna go,
And I'm gonna
he
be
says,
stuck.
I'm gonna go get it, and then we're gonna.
And initially, I believe it was, but Jim can, supervisor repeated, but initially it was because it was purchasing cabinets, so to me, that was a one-time thing, and that's what I was.
Was for something they purchased at Home Depot. It's the only place you could find it. So now things are hard to come by, and if you can find it, you want to get it.
I don't believe they think that that's a one-time thing. I think that they believe that that's
Yes.
the.
That's gonna be
That's the way it came out best. I agree.
Correct. I believe because of the supply chain problems, that you have to grab things when they're available. I think that was one of the reasons that,
So I think that this board needs to decide what the rules are gonna be, because I can't audit something that.
Which is the reason for the meeting. And also, there was a lot of discussion over the Omnia partners in Sourcewell. So I think if we can get our heads around those types of cooperatives, we can do whatever we need to do with our policy. You know, you guys, the key here, we've heard it for years, the comptroller's office is gonna tell you, you have to follow your policy. Whatever you adopt, you have to follow. And I think we just have to look at that, and, because I don't, talking to Janice earlier, it may not be a limits thing, it may be more of a, when you need a purchase order, if you're buying off of these cooperatives, do we need to be members? Will they send us an invoice? I think it's a lot of that.
We have a meeting on Thursday, I will see you for that.
We can do it if it's later, like early afternoon, or later in the afternoon. I got doctor's appointment first thing in the morning,
And
so afternoon might be good. And we can circle the wagons with everybody like after the meeting, but yeah, the sooner we get started, the better.
Is that one that works for you? Thursday afternoon?
I got to start moving fertilizer here. I should know. I shouldn't be here now, but I'm not gonna keep that anymore this week.
And honestly, nothing can be done until the entire board adopts a new policy anyway, but as long as we've got some people, then maybe we can make some assignments of, you know, here's what your homework is, we'll take maybe a half an hour-ish to get started.
Okay, so those are the 2 supervisors.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Jim, do you want to touch base with Mike and make sure he understands that he still needs to follow the purchasing policy regardless of the use of that? I mean, he still needs to get a pre-approved purchase order before he goes and spends the money. I can tell you that's what they're gonna check.
Well, give me a time.
Okay, like,
Sometime Thursday, but it's fine with me. And then you
What's the normal bag?
yeah,
$500.
highway and
Procurement cards only $500.
yeah.
No, for everybody from the cards, usually about $500. It's easy work, it's amazing. Because you might get airline tickets quite a bit for different things. Yeah.
But it's all taxes, it's all uses.
I want to throw off.
Yeah.
And we can put together tomorrow, we can at least revisit that.
Their decision, but they understand that.
Janice.
Yeah,
Because I know they're short stamped, those baby ground is short stamped,
still
I think 3 people.
two people, I think, yeah. Yeah. It can be the department heads and or the people that are actually doing the work. Like Katie, Kristen, and
Right,
Susan, Scott.
so you'll be responsible for something.
Yeah, yep.
And like. All right. Anything else, Jan?
So you guys are doing something, what time, you'll send something out?
Thursday, we're thinking.
You want to talk a little bit about Thompson Hall?
Yes.
Ryan, did you find out anything?
The reports you looked at, there isn't any asbestos there. The recommendation is to get it tested. Make sure.
How about start at the beginning? If you would, please.
The stories I got is that there's rodent issues down there. They have caught 2 rodents in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. And the maintenance guys down there, and they have a exterminator coming. Exterminator caught none, the maintenance guys caught 2. And so the maintenance guys have gone around and buttoned up everything, sealed holes and cracks and everything else around windows and crawl spaces and whatnot. And the exterminator came in and looked at it and said, nothing, you know, I would have done a better job. He thought it was pretty good. So the issue was they see mouse rapids and whatnot. I've had apartments. I don't have them anymore, but I can leave food out. If you have a room, you're gonna find it. And if they find it, they're gonna come back and look again and again and again.
We're good friends.
Well, they're right. That's the point. So offices, I'm sorry, shouldn't have food sitting in them and whatnot. And I think that might be part of the problem. I don't know. Just throwing it out there, my experience with that. Nobody food laying around and you don't have issues, but nonetheless, they are there. I don't know how we can ever eradicate the problem fully, exterminate them, whatnot, but it's always friendly, they're always gonna more come back. So with that, the story was that there was house wrappers and whatnot, and suspended ceilings. They're still in there, looked up there, he sees something, he felt asbestos, he backed out, it's asbestos. Craig says there's nothing there according to reports, but there's something that should be tested.
Probably when we renovated that, it was all taken care of.
Well,
Not necessarily.
I want to say the same thing, but I know
Just
just
cover
5,
it.
6 years ago, we just covered the floor up at the fire training center,
Mhm.
just so we didn't have to abate the asbestos, and now we have to redo that whole building. We're gonna have to rip that floor up anyway,
Mhm.
so.
You
If
don't
there's
save
asbestos
anything.
someplace that we're working, let's abate it, get rid of it, and move on with it, quit trying to be the do the cheap way out and cover it up, because the only places in the butt later on.
No, we did, I can double check. I thought that was part of it.
There was asbestos abatement done twice in that building.
Yeah.
And according to the reports, there's one report that says something about a fibrous ceiling tile, which would be in those offices downstairs, that could be asbestos. But because it was a ceiling, a sub-ceiling, and they put new ductwork in and put a third sub-ceiling in. Which, hiding the problems doesn't work. Found that out when we renovated the labs in the hospital. They opened up a wall that was there for 25 years and there's asbestos in it. Now we gotta remove it because we opened it up.
So is there any
It just infuriating. We keep trying to do the cheap thing and we keep biting ourselves in the. Right. So my personal opinion is that
Girls out of the office out down there? Isn't
if
it-
it's not disturbed, it's not a problem. If they're gonna start cleaning up there and working and shuffling stuff, as soon as you touch it, you could disturb it. If it's undisturbed, it's cool, fine.
That's like the floor, went over the floor, like floor will seal up.
Yeah. So let's get tested. If it is,
I say we get tested and
get tested. If it is, go get it out of there and move forward.
And of course, they would have to be moved temporarily while it's being abated.
Well, that's it.
And I think.
Abatement nowadays was, years ago was, close it off for a week and disturb it and then put positive air in there or negative air in there and something, put through a filter. A lot of that's gotten real lax, but, so I think it's something in a couple of days. A weekend or something, but.
Yeah, you're right. What we're talking about is the downstairs. There's a 2-room utility room
Okay,
that is locked, and nobody goes in there, so they.
this is where the furnace
Yeah,
is, okay.
and the HVAC units are. There's a unused storage room. And there are 3 offices, 2 used by managers, and 1 that will be empty for payroll starting Friday. Made plans to do the payroll upstairs for other reasons. Nothing to do with this, but just for continuity of work. So what we're talking about is just 2 phones.
Okay. So they can move temporarily, if, I mean, ahead of the game.
And there's no issue,
Tested
there's no
first.
issue on that.
Okay,
There's been no evidence or complaint about the first floor.
like I said, if we need to move somebody temporarily, it's been done before, we'll find space. Anybody else on this subject?
All I got.
good answer.
Anything else?
Becky, the other night, we talked about that policy for the highway, if their fireman went, he wasn't gonna be charged time, he didn't have to charge time. And discussed with it, does that include all departments?
There's manpower available. I'll leave it out to the supervisors. What Supervisor Burke and I talked about was as far as it was a year ago, 2 years ago, we talked about how we might be able to help out with volunteer fire departments and that with having our highway guys be, if they're, can be available to go and do that. And I think it was.
Is there a fireman or just,
If they're firemen.
didn't we discuss
We had,
that?
the other day, we had a house fire in Perry, and one of the firemen, one of our better firemen, the interior guy, works for the health department, they was in Perry. You know, and he drove the fire truck, and he was afraid he's gonna have to charge time, and I said, let me check on that.
Didn't we discuss this last time I was here?
Yes.
We gave them permission
But I
to
think-
go if they were county employees.
It is in the minute somewhere, because I remember that too.
What we were talking about is in Warsaw, in particular, a lot of firemen work for the county.
Right.
And if there was a rescue call or a fire, would the board of supervisors allow a volunteer fireman from an arcade to go on the call to Warsaw? And that's as far as it goes.
I thought we said, we passed something that said that they could leave employment for a certain amount of time.
But then there was some resistance from the fire department themselves about having an outsider come in. Gary, wasn't that the kind of way it went?
Yeah,
I don't-
territorial stuff with the fire company.
I don't remember it being outside firemen. I thought it was just kind
If
of
you, if
a,
your own town had a fire, you could
you
go.
could go. Yeah, I don't believe it was cross, departments. I
This
thought.
was part of the discussion.
That was part of the
Oh,
discussion.
okay. That's the part I remember.
It was a Warsaw fireman, worked for the county, yes. But it was also because it was so short, wherever,
Right,
if a Warsaw guy was an arcade and we had a raging house fire, we'd be more than happy to have a guy from Warsaw come over, especially if he could run a pump
right.
And in this case, it was actually.
or drive the truck.
Run the hose, I don't care.
Anything.
we voted on something.
Yesterday, your fire had it up.
Especially now.
Was on TV, you know, we're short of manpower, we got guys from.
Yeah.
You know, one guy from each department, from 10 departments.
Well, that's the
Still
thing.
not enough.
That's the first thing you do with a working structure fire now is call mutual aid, not so much to get equipment there, but to get the manpower.
Yeah. So
You
sometimes.
just can't do it. Daytime, nighttime, doesn't matter. There's not enough manpower to man the station.
It was
Done many years ago, but then wasn't there some kind of an abuse thing or something, Doug?
I think we talked about, there was a gas call or something like that. You know, if
There
it
was-
Yeah.
Nuisance calls, yeah.
Yeah, there's always another angle.
Right.
But,
I know years ago, Lap Insulator used to let, if Pavilion had a fire, any kind of a call, they allowed their guys to leave Lap Insulator and go on the call. And it got abused as, like Doug said, got a call for a toothache, ambulance call for a toothache, so. People were leaving work to go to that, and
Right,
and then you have to pay 4 hours.
yeah,
yes,
That was,
Yeah.
that was what that problem.
so that created an issue.
Try to do the right thing.
did, yeah.
Years.
I remember.
Seems like every turn you take.
You're a driver?
And Jim, can we just wait and see what we actually have in the official minutes? And then go from there as far as this one particular case.
This only worked for 6 months at the health department.
So you didn't have the time to
Yeah.
put in.
I certainly think it's a good idea.
I do too,
I do too.
one way or
We
another,
might want to do a policy of some sort.
down the road.
We're here to
Cover.
protect the citizens of this county.
Yes.
Cover us.
And if a few people, one or two people,
We used to have a paper at the fire hall that was found out. And then you take it to your work and say, this is where you've been, this is why you were late, signed by the fire chief.
Like I said, just to get equipment
Done it already, just to
during the
have
day.
it.
It's
And then we'll see what we got on the record.
a good thing to bring up.
The state has that policy. When I worked for the state, that we went on call, it'd be our own department of call. It wouldn't be, unless it was a fire, it would be our company got called to that fire too. But we'd always have to get a slip, turn it in, and then we would be credited back our time. Because there was a lot there that was, you would charge it to Exactly. So you could just keep track of that if you wanted to know how many hours a year that you actually paid or put into that system.
Might even be an incentive for somebody to take advantage.
Anything.
That's not my baby.
And if you, somebody they knew, you didn't bring this up, because if they knew that they monitored you, that you came in right after the call, not 4 hours after the call was done. They didn't
If
care.
we're going to explore this, we should have a discussion about exempting certain departments, such as hospital and the sheriff's office.
And I think we talked about that before.
You can't have people.
Absolutely.
Right,
Yeah, that was part of that.
it was,
They weren't allowed.
In each other.
right.
And this is the other thing that a lot of some employers do is if they're bringing the slips that Supervisor Brick is talking about, they're protected from disciplinary action for attendance. Which is really a different question than compensation.
And I've seen that, because we got state employees, as president. And guy shows up on a call, and says, oh, yeah, I'm gonna need a slip to work. And he sits there and talks to the chief for 3 more hours, oh, I can punch out, so I'll go now. So they'll go, so you can see them. But do worry about that. You know, and that just sits there and makes draw, I mean, just. That's part of the abuse side, you know?
There's no right.
He's supposed to be working till 3:30, but he sat around the hall and talked to the chief for 3 hours. And went down at 3 o'clock and punched out and said, you know, I was at the fire all day.
When that state policy was once basically, and that's the supervisor's job, to ensure that once the truck gets back to the hall or the ambulance gets back to the hall, then you have a certain amount of time, like we always had an hour and a half from the time we got back to the hall till you got back to work. You had to be back in that period of time. That's how they monitored that. So with Brian, like Brian says, yes, we do. You get somebody that wants to stand there for 2 hours and talk fire talk. And then by the time he goes home and puts his uniform on and goes back to work, well, it's time to punch out. Well, if the supervisor, if you have a good supervisor there to do the time, it's not his buddy, says, guess what? We're using your time.
And that's just a whole side of the time. I mean, 25, 30 years ago, people didn't look at that, you know, the volunteers that was, I don't think many looked at it that way. They went, whether it was, you know, time to go to work or not, they went and helped the community out and took the lumps when they went to work later, you know, or called their boss. I went to the house party last night. I didn't get my stuff done. I got up 4 this morning and took a little seat down the arcade.
I didn't see on TV.
Nice. But, yeah, it's just, whatever, I mean, it's a time aside, people always want something for what they're doing.
And what started this, I just told Brian, back at the time, Joe Kushner was on board, he was an EMT. Warsaw was struggling to fill ambulance calls, as you know, I mean, you're talking ambulance, any place, Warsaw, Arcade, Perry, and Attica, be there every day. He said, hey, I'd be willing, if I'm here, I'm willing to go on a call. I said, no. So then that sparked this whole conversation about what we're just talking about now.
So if you want to form a policy, my suggestion is to have an ad hoc committee. And I think Supervisor Granger and Supervisor Brick definitely should be on that committee. And I said.
Supervisor May.
Supervisor May, yes. I'd like to involve HR.
I think it's time.
So everyone's willing.
No, you might say.
I mean, I would think you're talking maybe 20 instances a year at the most.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, and the beauty of it is, if you got a situation where somebody's hanging out at hall afterwards. I mean, it's our department that registers the time ins and time outs. You tell the public health director or whatever, if you got one of those situations, you got the slip from the person or whatever, call down to emergency service and ask them, you know, when did they return to the hall? And then you give them their grace period in case they have to clean hoses or even just change their clothes and shower and get something to eat before they get to work.
So the meeting that they have should take about 5 minutes. Formalize this and bring it back to us.
Another thing to look at is, given the current shortage of manpower, who are we to, disciplining or challenging somebody else? It's easy for them to say, I'm not going. And now you're down a guy. I mean, we're not in the driver's seat.
No, but my whole thing is on that is to let them be aware, maybe not discipline, but let them make it aware that they need to try to do a better job. So we don't lose this privilege. Yeah.
More discouraged.
It's just easy to do for us, okay.
Most people are-
Just my 2 cents on the whole subject is if we don't get more volunteers or we don't adopt a policy like this, sooner or later, the county's gonna have to form fire departments and pay people.
I don't think
So the longer we can put it off, the better.
Not later either, sooner.
Oh, yeah, it's coming. It's coming during the day.
Down the road, a bucket down the road on this project.
Wait another 10 years to see what.
Yeah, it's,
Absolutely.
So I will leave it up to you on the ad hoc committee to find this all the time. It should be
No.
quick and easy to.
that's what I just said.
Just bring it back to public safety. Right. Anything else? We have a short break before.
Madam Chair, before we leave that topic one, would it be sensible also to put Stryker or Alex Bryan on this? So they know the insides, what we can really do with the.
That's what I just said to Jim.
Yeah.
You know.
Maybe Bill Stryker would be the one that would work
Yeah,
on that.
he would, so that we know we're doing something we can do,
That's right.
and we don't think that we can do.
So we will send out the invitation.
Cool. You looking at me?
Supervisor Granger? Yes.
I can.
And then just coordinate. Send out.
We'll do it for the next 2 weeks, because I won't be
I'll get together with them and decide when we want it and then we'll
Okay, thank
do
you.
something.
Now. Right before our board supervisor meeting. Okay. Yes, I already tomorrow, so it's good idea. I know, I have to search for it.
Probably a few logistical things you gotta work out on. Somebody from the fire department, who's gonna be, responsible for them. As far as like. I had a fire, somebody from my own.